Time for another Steven Universe review. We're going to be reviewing Gemcation. This is Nickster Network, and I'm Nick. So we find Steven once again looking at his phone, waiting for a response from Connie. He's reviewing his previous text messages, and he's upset and embarrassed by some of the things that he's sent so far because he's desperate to hear from her. I think we've all been there. We've all been excited to hear from someone or hear back from someone or worried. And having to wait patiently for a text message is not the funnest thing in the world. So, Steven's dad, Greg, realizes, alright, Steven's not being himself, he's upset, but he doesn't know what's going on. We, the reviewer, knows what's going on, but Steven's dad, Greg, does not know what's going on. So, Greg and the Gems plan for them to go on a surprise vacation to a cabin. Steven seems a little bit apprehensive, but they are all trying to work together and be upbeat for his sake, and they go on this vacation together. Now, I want to first point out that I'm so happy that the Gems and Greg are all kind of like functioning as a together family unit right now, because in the past, they've kind of tried to distance themselves from Greg, and they each had different ideas of how to raise Steven, but they're finally working together, which is amazing. So they get to the cabin. They still are trying their best to tiptoe around Steven, make him feel better, make him feel loved and welcome, but Steven still seems upset. They each take turns approaching Steven and trying to find out what's wrong. Amethyst takes him aside for a while. She starts talking about the stars and like how big the universe is and kind of trying to have like a deep conversation. Some of the kinds of things that Steven's used on her. And he's really not responding. He just doesn't seem bothered. He's still focused on his phone. And then Amethyst gives up on that. I want to say that that's great for Amethyst's character development. She's not just being direct and irrational and abrupt. She's taking the time to consider what Steven's feeling and trying to approach things from a way that he would have approached it. So she's learned a lot so far. Later on, Greg asks Garnet to give it a try. Garnet's waiting in the hot tub for Steven. She exclaims to Steven that, I know what's going on. I know you're probably upset about Pink Diamond and everything you saw in Homeworld. Like, let me tell you more about it. So she starts off by starting to explain about Pink Diamond and who she was and what was going on in the Gem War. But Steven cuts her off and says, yeah, I already know all this. It's not a big deal. Who cares? Now, I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty bitter about this moment because Steven cut her off with something that the Steven Universe fans have been craving for so long. More information about the Gem War. So it's really frustrating that this was like dangled in front of us and Garnet was prepared to share this information and it just got swatted out of the air because Steven couldn't be bothered. He's more interested in what's going on with his relationship with Connie. That aside, how upset I am about that doesn't take away from the episode. I'm just a little bit miffed, but going back to the episode, Steven gets out, walks away. Garnet's failed at trying to figure out what's going on with him. Later on in the day, Steven overhears Greg talking to the Gems, explaining that he must have gone through something traumatic on Homeworld. He doesn't understand Gem stuff. Steven would open up to them. They need to keep trying. They need to put whatever Steven saw that traumatized him so badly into context for him. So they both agree that Pearl needs to talk to him next. She knows the most about Homeworld. She kind of is probably one of the Gems closest to Steven. They're all equally close in different ways, but Pearl's probably the most connected to Steven's past in terms of like his mother and his heritage and things like that. Pearl takes Steven aside. She starts to talk to him and explaining how she wishes that she could have been there to take him to Homeworld and show him everything, and then it must have been traumatic that he was taken there with the context of being a prisoner. In this moment, we see that Pearl still has a lot of love for Homeworld and what Homeworld was, which also puts into perspective how much it must have meant for her to leave all of that behind in order to follow Rose Quartz. So she says, there's so many things that I want to tell you and explain that are actually impossible. And to emphasize this, every time she tries to say something, she says she has to cover her mouth. She physically restrains herself. And it looks like it's something that she can't control, as if there's something preventing her from telling him more about the diamonds in Homeworld. But Steven's not really paying attention. He's still looking at his phone. Again, more information that I really would love to hear that has been swatted away again by Steven being focused on his phone. I mean, I don't want to criticize Steven in this moment because sometimes we're going to have problems that are bigger to us than others, and Connie is the focus right now. But I really refuse to believe that something that's been weighing on Steven for so long, he's not going to care about hearing about just because he's upset about Connie. That aside, again, back to the episode, Steven then exclaims, "No, I'm not upset about any of this. I'm upset because Connie isn't talking to me." He then storms off. Greg overhears what was going on. He then realizes this is something he knows about. This is something that he can help with. He finally sees where he is of value to Steven. So he chases after Steven, sits down, they talk about it. Steven shares his problems with Greg, what he did with Connie, and why she's upset. And Greg explains that Steven needs to give her more time. They also realize that Steven didn't have reception, so he might have gotten a text from Connie that just hasn't been received. Steven panics, and then they start driving all over the countryside looking for reception. They finally find it. He gets a text message, and it's from Ronaldo. So, again, through all of this, I am happy that even though we didn't get the information we were looking for, we were constantly teased. Steven is also getting teased with text messages from Connie that aren't actually from her. They're from Ronaldo, which is someone he doesn't want to hear from. That's the end of the episode. They are huddled up on top of the van, just hugging Steven, and they finally have reconnected, and it feels like things are finally starting to feel back to normal since Steven's been off to Homeworld. Despite some of the major disappointments of this episode and information being withheld from us, I do think that it was a good episode. I'm really happy that Greg is starting to feel more useful as a father to Steven. I think for a long time he's kind of felt like too much of a side character where the gems are the most important to Steven. He's there for Steven when he needs him, but this is a situation where Greg was the only one that could help with this. He was the only one that knew how to talk to Steven about girls. So I think it's great to see more depth with Steven and Greg's relationship, and to see that some of Greg's insecurities might have been discarded after this. Like, there is a part of Steven's life that only Greg can help with. He might not be powerful crystal gem, but he's still Steven's father and a big part of his life. I'm also really excited for the crystal gems because they become so empathetic and they've developed so much with Steven in their lives. Before, problems about like how Steven was feeling or other human characters, they wouldn't have been bothered by that because it's not something like they've quoted in previous episodes. It's not a problem they can punch. It's not a problem they can fight. So they just leave Steven up to it. So they're really going out of their way to make Steven feel better. I find it really hard to believe that Steven would be willing to discard all this extra information about Pink Diamond, his mom, and Homeworld. It's frustrating. It really, really is. But Rebecca Sugar has a history of liking to troll the Steven Universe fans and poke fun at them or dangle things or mislead them in certain ways, so I'm okay with that. I appreciate that humor. There's some things people have gotten upset with her about in those regards that I've thought were clever, but as long as we get some of that information back soon, I think I can come to forgive her. But overall, this episode was really great. I'm still glad that the problem with Steven and Connie has not been resolved yet. I feel bad that has not heard from her, but this is very relatable to a lot of people. There's problems that can't be solved in 10 minutes or less, so that's what I'm liking about this story arc so far. So that's all I had to say about this episode. This is Nick, signing off. If you like this episode of Nick's Nerd Network, please like and subscribe. If you have different opinions or would like to share some of your ideas, please share these in the comment section below. Please keep it constructive and friendly. Thanks so much for watching and have a wonderful day.